everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. Well, this is it, guys. This is the last podcast before actual college football happens. We are here to preview the last division that we had, which is the Sun Belt. Independents aren't real. They're not a conference, so they don't get their own preview. But anyways, I am joined, as always, by my co-host at BuckMetrics. How are you doing tonight?
I'm actually kind of sad that preview season is just about over. As much as I love the regular season, there's a special joy that goes to digging through all the data and seeing the stories that might develop and adopting a team like Colorado State and Akron that we've kind of adopted this season. And maybe there's one in the Sun Belt. I don't know. Last season, just to remind people, I adopted the Jaguars, and they treated me very nicely. Yes, well, and
we had another team we adopted a bit last season too.
In the Sun Belt, or
James Madison.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, during the season, in fairness, I was pretty scared of them. Didn't know what to think as they moved up. But
we brought them
pretty
in,
quickly,
and they brought us a lot of money in some of those games, and then they randomly lost 3 games, which sucked. But also they were robbed of going to the conference championship game. But anyways, we will discuss that later. But the Sun Belt is a fun conference, and a lot of fun teams in here, and there's been some upsets with these teams this last year. So we'll talk about that in a second. So
one thing too is they're getting a lot more national respect. I think it's because it's interesting. Even though they've gone through some realignment, they still are relatively stable. They make geographic sense. They added JMU last season, which was really smart, and that was after ditching Idaho and my beloved New Mexico State Aggies in 2018. So, they just kind of make right move after right move and really found themselves in a good spot. One other thing that's really interesting is, even though they've, it was pretty clear that they were the second best G5 conference, or maybe the best, depending on who you're asking. They're still a portal loser. The average FBS team retained 65% of their Ryan from the prior season. The average Power 5 team, 76%. So you can see who's on the winning side of that. And our beloved Sun Belt, only 60%. So you can see where some of those kids are coming from.
It's funny because as we've done these previews and doing this preview, I saw it, we're like, oh, great transfers transfers in. All of a sudden we're doing Sun Belt. It's like, oh, they got decimated by the portal. It's like, oh, this is where they're going. These are where the small fish are. There's the big fish and there's the small fish. This is the
exactly.
But it's interesting because they're the ones being rated, which means they have to be doing something right on talent, right? So I think
exactly.
So they'll just hopefully restock in a lot of cases. But this is the new paradigm of college football potentially. So
it is. So with having said that, do you want to start off with, we're going to, just for format, we're going to go through the East Division and the West Division, because the divisions here really tell the narrative as much as I think any conference other than maybe the Big Ten. So you want to start with James Madison in the East?
Yeah, so I'll start with James Madison here. I have this as stairs up. As you pointed out, and as I've been kind of doing some of the rankings here, they had one of the best defenses last year. And, as I just mentioned, again, they had a weird stretch where they lost to Georgia Southern, Marshall, and Louisville. They were favorites in 2 of those games, and they lost to those both. Like, they were double-digit favorites, actually. 12-point favorite against Georgia Southern, 12-point favorite against Marshall, lost those outright, and then lost badly against Louisville, 24 points when they were only 7-point dogs. Honestly, we were skeptical of them at first, right? We thought, okay, this team isn't going to go very far. It's a brand new FCS team in D1 FBS. It's going to be rough for them. But they did really well. And again, having one of the best defenses is very impressive for a team that wasn't even in FBS a year ago, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This team is a lot more experienced, and again, it is still very sad. They are still, I believe, they are ineligible for the conference championship game, I believe, and they are still, I believe, ineligible for a bowl, I believe, which is very unfortunate.
Correct.
And I think when they started losing those games, I think that was roughly when that was, because they had a waiver pending, and they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to give it to you. Now maybe they can appeal it and whatever. Maybe they can get one this year or something. But yeah, it's very sad. I still think they are one of the best teams in the conference. And again, like they upset Coastal a team that played in the conference championship game last year. They absolutely destroyed them in some cases. It was like 47-7. Um, so I do like this team, and we're gonna see some really good value on this team. There's every time whenever you're looking at like non um basically non Power Five teams, and basically it's a relatively unknown name. There is so much value on these teams. So like yeah, I'm 100% on James Madison here. I think they could be a really good team this year, even though it won't matter. But I think it should be a really fun team.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe the word might be out on them a little bit because they were so good. Maybe it's somewhat out, so maybe the lines won't be as soft when it comes to them because they were so good. Now the thing is, you know, the three games that they lost were when they lost their quarterback Todd Centeio. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
that little rough patch that they had last season. So maybe that kind of helps us this year in that their form is dirtied up. If for some people that just look at win loss over the prior season and see 8-3. All right, sounds like an average, pretty good Sun Belt team. Not literally, I have them as the 11th best in all of FBS. This program just knows how to win. That was the one reason I was optimistic about them, although I was scared to really jump in head first. They're 41-8 over the past 4 seasons. And I think, kind of going both sides, I think the word's a little bit out, but I think that level of just, in horse racing, horses just win. There's just a premium on that. And I think they're not known as just like the horse that'll just wins and just doesn't just run a good race. Um, what I'm expecting this season, like I said, they did have a rough patch last season when Centeio went out. The starter, his name is Alonzo Barnett. He did not play when Centeio was out, so we don't really have anything on him other than he's not the stiff that actually cost them 3 games last season. Um, what I really like is the backup is Jordan McLeod. I liked him when he was at South Florida. I was really, really frustrated that he actually looked really promising in his first season at Arizona, but they couldn't start him at the beginning because I think he just didn't know enough of the offense. And he moved the offense better, but he only played a game. Then he got hurt, played like a game and a half. If it's McLeod, I'll look at it this way. I like McLeod. If somebody beats him out, I'm going to have some confidence in them. I'm not sure what the ceiling of this offense is. Centeio was a proven Division I player. He left Colorado State when, this is an interesting thought process, when Steve Adazio was fired from Colorado State. I don't know how you come to that action. Maybe he just really, really didn't like Jay Norvell, which is also interesting. So the offense, we'll see. I'm pretty positively inclined towards it. The defense, I had it 5th overall in FBS. I had it first among a group of 5 teams. With the returning starts and improvement metrics, they should be about as good, if not a little bit better, this upcoming season. I have them favored in 9 or 10 games. The total is 8, and it's -110 on both sides. That seems playable. There's better bets, so I'm not going to play this, but I don't know if you have any friends that are in Virginia that are looking for a season win total to play. I would definitely turn them on to this because it'll be a fun team to watch too if you like defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, they've got some games on here. They don't really have like they're not really having a big name on here other than Virginia, which they could definitely beat Virginia. Other than that, it's mostly just Sunbelt teams, right? So I not a lot of huge. Like, we're not gonna get them as like a 21-point dog or something in any of these games, but
Yeah,
yeah, I mean 8.5 plus 140. That seems. I got 8.5 plus 140. That seems pretty playable. I think that's not a
on
horrible.
the over, yeah.
Yeah.
One part of that is just I'm so negatively inclined on Utah State, and they're at Utah State. I'm sure they're going to be a live dog in that game. I don't know. Maybe the market will smarten up and have them favored, but I'd have their win probability. I don't have it with me, but I'd put them at probably about 60 to 65%, if not higher, to win that game alone. And if you're
Hmm.
beating, a team from a higher conference on the road, that's where you're going to make up a lot of ground, I think, on the market if you're going to take that over.
Hmm.
They,
Yeah.
they could beat Virginia too. Virginia's offense is just an absolute mess.
Hmm.
They might keep them to single digits.
Okay. What's
All right.
what's your team? Your next team.
My next is Marshall, and I wanted to go over them because now third season under Charles Huff. I actually heard another podcast say, "Hey, I think Charles Huff is in line to get a Power Five job. If things go well this season." I just can't see it. This team is elevator down for me. Um, their offense was a negative 2.5 by my power ratings last season. Only three offenses in the entire conference were worse last season. Only Texas State and Louisiana had a worse team apex. They have the worst returning quarterback in the Sun Belt Conference. His name is, this sounds like a made up spy name, Cam Fancher. Um, Good on you, Mr. Fancher. His apex last season was a 73. Really rough. He had 6 games with an apex under 40. Very inconsistent. He tore up, as everybody did, the Coastal Carolina defense. He had an apex of 153, and he followed that up with an apex of negative 48. That's about as bad as I've seen in a single game against Old Dominion, who really didn't have an awesome defense. Um, the last 3 games of the regular season, he actually had a decent apex, 120, or good apex, 124. So I was thinking maybe he turned the corner. Then you look at the bowl game, and his apex was 4. Um, and just for reference, 100 is average. So I can't trust this kid. Um, what I did notice is that the interceptions seem to like just mentally kill him. In the games when he threw an interception, his apex was a 19, and when he didn't throw an interception, it was a 116. So it just seems like, and I've seen these guys before. We had USC had one named Mike Van Raphorst. They just make one mistake, and it just cascades, and it becomes just just a spiraling offensive performance. They lose half of their Ryan from last season, which is rough even for a Sun Belt team. The good news is their offensive line should improve. So the offense, I've got serious questions about. The defense was awesome last season. They improved from a 3.3 to a 7.3, even though they had below average improvement metrics going into last season. And we'll get to the reason for that in a second here. But on the other side of that, they've got a really, similarly, they have a low improvement metric for this season. So if I put this all together and kind of draw the lens back a little bit, Charles Huff is a former offensive assistant under some good coaches on the offensive side. PJ Fleck, Joe Moorhead, my favorite, maybe yours. Also not my favorite, but admittedly a very good offensive coach, Steve Sarkisian. The offense improved a little bit in year 1 under Huff, but it really regressed in year 2, which is really alarming since this is, his side of the ball. Big picture, the improvement in this program since he's taken over has really been on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive coordinator last season was Lance Guidry, as we talked about in the ACC preview. Lance Guidry is now the defensive coordinator at Miami. He was hired by Tulane, and then Mario plucked him about a week later. So there's a lot of signs that just point to a program that can really go down in a hurry here. Not only that, in the Sun Belt, you get 2 teams from the other division, and they pull South Alabama, which is rough because South Alabama is clearly one of the 2 top teams in the West. So a team that I think is heading the wrong direction gets a bad schedule pull. The season total on them is 7, so there's already some regression baked into that from 9 to 7. They won 9 last season. I can't really bet the under because this goes back to my crowded neighborhood problem. I think they're in a kind of they're in the middle class of the Sun Belt, maybe just a little bit lower middle class for all of college football, and they just have a lot of games that are coin flips. So, my heart wants to bet them under, but the brain is saying, just move along. I'm really, really, really interested to see what happens September 23 when they host Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has Ollie Jennings III, former Sun Belt star. I might be a little more bullish on them than some. I think that's going to tell a lot because, that'll basically tell us if Virginia Tech scores, that'll tell us that this defense is taking a step back. And also, you've got this Marshall offense in decline versus a Virginia Tech defense, which should be improving under Brett Pry. There's a lot of story to be told in that game. So, color me total nerd on this. I am looking forward to Virginia Tech going to Marshall. I threw a lot at you. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually do. I do have this team as a lobby team, not up or down. I mean, they're 9-4. Their win total 7.5. So like plus minus one is probably lobby-ish, I guess. They do keep their quarterback, as you mentioned, but he's not particularly great. They lose their top wide receivers, and they lost a lot of stuff on defense. They did get lucky last year in a couple of these games. They beat Notre Dame. That shouldn't happen. They beat James Madison when James Madison lost their quarterback. That's not great. They got bad Old Dominion. They beat App State. They probably shouldn't have beaten App State either. Um, they got Troy when Troy was in a funk there too. They lost to Bowling Green. Oh no, they lost to Troy, but then they also lost to Bowling Green. So like, there's a really kind of funky season. I kind of think 9-4 is kind of a peak for a program like this. I think it's probably more likely than not you're looking at regression. But again, looking at the schedule, okay, they play Albany week 1. It's like a D2 team. Okay, yeah, they get Virginia Tech. Okay, but then they also have like a bunch of other, like they could have this. Depends on how the Sun Belt shakes out, right? This conference schedule could be either death, and then they could have like 4 wins, or they could be like they could get 8 and get down to 8-4, right? They could get 8-4, right? So it's debatable as to exactly how this will shake out. I think it's probably I'm going to go lobby and be safe with that, but I don't think this is one of the top teams in the Sun Belt, though. No.
Yeah, very fair. And kind of to that point, which I didn't really flesh out, that Virginia Tech game is interesting, but you made a good point. They start with Albany. Who knows with that? This is interesting with their schedule, early schedule. Then they're at East Carolina, who's starting over at quarterback. And in the American, we basically all agreed that that's going to be a slow rebuild, and we don't expect much out of them. Virginia Tech, that can be framed no matter what happens anyway. You can put any kind of story around that and just say move on. Old Dominion, they probably beat. So you could be really, into the first week of October before we have any idea. And, we'll have enough data, at least I will in my model to know better than the market. They could still be there could be a wide range of opinions on what this team is. So I'm really interested to see when they play at NC State in the first week of October, if they're still getting credit for like that win over Notre Dame last season, or if that's completely baked out of the line at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So
Appalachian State.
yeah. So App State again. This team is actually very fascinating. If we had to pick a most fascinating team here, I probably would have picked this one. This team loses 63-61 to North Carolina in week 1. Absolutely insane game. I remember that game. That game was riveting. One of the best college football games ever. Then, for some reason, the next week they are 18-point underdogs to Texas A&M, and that was one of my biggest wins ever in college football. Well, I mean, in terms of like not like dollar amount, but like in terms of value play. Then they beat Troy. Then they go on a massive slide, and somehow they don't actually make a bowl game. I don't. Yeah, no, they didn't make a bowl game. Weirdly enough,
no.
Even though they were 6-6, just a very weird team. I have them as stairs up. They lose their quarterback from last year, but the team's much more experienced. And like, if you're telling me here's a team that basically loses by 2 to basically the team that goes to the ACC championship game, beat a team in the SEC, and that you're telling me that team doesn't make a bowl game. And like they don't, because then they lose to a bunch of random teams that they probably shouldn't have lost to at all, right? And I think that's crazy. I think that means there's more than enough talent on this team. Like if the team can perform at that high level, there's no reason they should have had those losses. This team should have made a bowl. Probably should have maybe even competed for the conference championship game, but just due to a bunch of stupid losses, didn't. And I think there's no way you can look at this team other than stairs up. Because like if they were able to perform at that level in those first 2 games last year, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to perform at that level this year. So, and also, before I hand it off to you, September 9th at North Carolina, part 2. So let's see what happens in part 2 of this.
Yeah.
Apparently groundbreaking rivalry here. This apparently amazing rivalry. So I'm excited for that game.
Yeah, that might be one of those that's mandated by the state legislature. Who knows? I've actually got them as stairs down. I'll just take kind of big picture, the other side of the argument, and just say, yeah, you made a good point. That game, that the offensive performance against North Carolina was awesome. Winning at College Station is amazing. As weird as that program can be, it's a very tough venue to play at. And then they beat Troy, who won the conference. I'm going to say, if I look, I don't know how you lose to Texas State, who had been miserable for so long and finally just, shot their coach and threw him overboard eventually. And the loss to Georgia Southern, I'm just not a fan of losing to Clay Helton in November. That just makes me suspicious. So I'm going to say, I think the talent was there, and I'm kind of wondering about the coach. And to that point, they lose their offensive coordinator to Auburn. Shannon Dawson, I think might be his name. He actually improved their offense quite a bit in the short time that he was there. You mentioned they lost their quarterback, Chase Bryce. It's amazing that he was so good at App State because he was so bad at Clemson. And just a detour for 30 seconds here. What does that say about Casey Thompson, who's making a likewise drop as an actually proven Power 5 quarterback to a G5 conference? Okay. Rails back on here. I don't know much about the new quarterback. Their offensive line loses a ton. Their defense took a huge step back last season, although it was expected based on they had low improvement metrics. But there's not really improvement projected for them, too. What's good for them is they pull Louisiana Monroe and Southern Miss from the West. I don't really believe in those two teams. The problem is, I guess, also big picture, I don't know what this team's strength is. Based on last season, it's not going to be defense, and a lot has to fall in place for it to be offense. The season total is 6.5 to 7. And again, I can't play this either way. They're just a huge part of that huge middle class / what you call the mushy middle. So I see him regressing a little bit, although I can't really back it with any money. Yeah, so we disagree on this one. This is one to flag.
Maybe, yeah. Well, we'll have to see. You know what? Now that you mentioned about the offensive coordinator, that is a little concerning. Yeah, but we'll have to see. Yeah, I think it really is the question of were the losses unlucky or was it bad coaching? And we'll have the answer to that at the end of this year, right? So,
yeah.
But now the thing is, in the past though, they've had good results. I mean, looking back here, 9-win seasons back, 11-win season, 13-win season, 9-win season, 10-win season, all the way back to 2019. So they've had good results. It's just apparently not last season. So
yeah, it's weird. Last season kind of doesn't make sense. Now you're going to talk me into kind of your side, so I'm going to stop now.
Okay. Well, this is the benefit of this. We'll have to see. Let's see what that line is week 2. That's going to be let's see what that line is week 2, and then actually it's technically week 1, but it is whatever. Coastal Carolina.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Coastal Carolina. I have these guys as elevator down, and just the big picture is we're going from a really good coach, I think, in Jamie Chadwell. At least he was a really good coach for this program, to Tim Beck, and we'll get to Mr. Beck in a moment. So their offense, was a plus 5.8 last season, which is good. Grayson McCall actually had the top apex in all of FBS last season. He's the most experienced quarterback in the conference. They retain 90% of their Ryan from last season, and their offensive line actually projects, to be very improved. So that's all bullish on the offense from a metric standpoint. The defense was actually the 6th worst in all of FBS by my metrics. And what's even scarier is there's really no improvement projected based on the learning curve last season and the number of starters that return. Their new DC, Craig Nivar, he was a safeties coach at USC. I'm pretty sure this is the first time he's been an FBS defensive coordinator as well. So why is this elevator down? There's a lot of pieces on offense. Well, I, like you, have watched a lot of football on TV. I've seen a lot of games, including Ohio State and Texas and North Carolina State. And never when I watched any of those games did I think, wow, Tim Beck should really be a head coach. Never during those broadcasts did I hear anybody say, Tim Beck should be a head coach. However, I have heard many complaints from Twitter and message boards from fans of Texas, Ohio State, North Carolina State saying, "Are you kidding me with this guy? Why is he our offensive coordinator?" Um, it was a lazy, geographically nearby hire. There's nothing that I've seen from his offenses that resemble what Chadwell was doing with Coastal Carolina. So I'm really wondering what McCall is going to look like under Beck. Um, I'd be shocked if there's significant improvement on the defense. You know, there was never a moment when I was watching USC safeties under Craig Nivar and thought, wow, this guy would be a great defensive coordinator. Um, they're going to need to outscore opponents basically because their defense is just so bad. Even if they do improve some, they have a lot of ground to make up. And I don't know if they can, um, you know, given what Beck likes to run. And if he tries to run what Chadwell does, well, can you just pick that up? I don't think you just read a book and just say, we're going to run this now. You know, you really need to be kind of the author of that offense to know how it works best. They also had 3 games of good luck last season, so they were the luckiest in all of FBS. Now, probably a lot of that is the great play of McCall. I've noticed some kind of correlation between the two. But along those lines, K Ford projects 1.4 games of regression. The season total is 7.5. The over is actually getting played at minus 130. I can't play it because I'm not going to play. I think there's just too much projection and just scenarios / narratives I'm throwing on there rather than hard metrics. But I'm definitely not playing the over. I can tell you that. If I had a friend that was in the coastal region of Carolina, wherever that is, I'd probably say take the under on this team on the under 7.5.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I kind of like the under. I do have this as a lobby team. The arguments about the new head coach are sound though. You always worry about that though, right? Like when you have a good head coach leave, and I mean, you still have Grayson McCall for now, but he did get injured at the end of last season, and then the second he was gone, the team just absolutely collapsed, which is very concerning. It means that this is very held up by Grayson McCall, and now he is probably looking at the NFL. The questions are, if this goes sideways, does he just say, okay, that's it, I'm done, basically. I'm just going to phone this in the last couple of weeks, and then that's it, right? And you could just, like, this is the thing, right? Like, look, I'm not getting injured. He did get injured. He was out for a couple of weeks. I think he returned for the conference championship game. But, like, if you're at a point where it's like, okay, I'm not risking anything for this. I'm just going to go to the NFL. The questions are how far he would go if he has a rough final year, but he might look good, but then the team could be bad too. Like they keep the quarterback, like, yeah. So I also had the note here that wasn't the greatest. Like I wasn't thinking like, oh man, NC State, man, their offense was that was really good offense. Like it was not particularly great last year. I mean they had Devin Leary and they made him kind of look not great. So I think it's just kind of it's a little concerning for me there. So I'll go with lobby, but it stares down. I think I'm probably going to end up fading this team a lot this year. I mean, it was just crazy how like the fall, right? Like, basically after they lost Grayson McCall, they just got absolutely destroyed by James Madison, and then all equally destroyed by Troy. And it's crazy how bad that went. And it's just, I have concerns about a team that is just like, if one player is gone, then suddenly this team barely exists. And that's concerning for me. So.
And who knows if he's even the same guy under Tim Beck too. I mean, you almost want to say Grayson McCall under Chadwell as one player. And Grayson McCall under Tim Beck might be another player. It might be the same guy. We'll see. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll go now with Georgia State. So I have Georgia State as stairs up, actually. So last year they had like literally an impossibly difficult schedule last year. They should probably make a bowl this year. Last year they had South Carolina and North Carolina, and then for their conference they got Coastal Carolina, and then they had App State. They did beat App State. They had James Madison. They did beat them, but just a very rough schedule. I mean, you're opening with South Carolina and then also North Carolina, another ACC and SEC school. That's very, very rough. So I think this team will improve. I mean, again, if you just pencil in like a couple easier schedules, suddenly this team is 6-6 and making a bowl, right? So I think this team should make a bowl game this year. This team has made improvements. I think this team will be better this year.
So, just to be clear, are you saying that starting the season with Rhode Island and Connecticut is easier than what they had last season?
That
Just
that
want
seems
to
a
make
lot better.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and then they pull rebuilding Charlotte on top of that too.
hmm
Yeah. You know, I let me pull up my notes here. I have them as stairs up also. They had clearly the top running offense in the Sun Belt last season. Um, Again, this is a scenario, but I think there's a very realistic path here. If Grayson McCall is not the same under Tim Beck at Coastal, their quarterback Granger could actually be the best quarterback in the conference. They're starting over on offensive line, and I think they actually lost Jamari Thrash. I think this is where he came from. Let me see. Yeah, he landed in Louisville. He was like a top 15 Ryan player. But I'm encouraged that you've got a quarterback and a system that are proven, though. So there's still some pieces. The defense was slightly above average for the Sun Belt. They'll probably take a little bit of a step back. They had 2.2 games of bad luck last season, and K Ford is showing them improving by 1.4 games. So when you've got those two things lining up, that's a really bullish sign. What are you seeing for the season total wins for them? I'm seeing
six
five and a
six.
half. Okay,
I got 6.5 plus 120.
that makes sense. Yeah, because I saw five and a half under 165, and that just sounds like it's going to be a six at somewhere. Um,
hmm
I'm not going to play it, but because again, this is a maybe we'll see kind of thing. But you know, even if they do have the best quarterback in the conference, I just I see him in a crowded neighborhood again. Too many coin flips, and I think there's probably a better option in the neighborhood that is the Sun Belt East. Um, should I get to them now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
That would be Old Dominion. I have them as stairs up, and this kind of surprises me. The first thing, as we mentioned, Ollie Jennings III, who was one of our favorites last season, they lost him to Virginia Tech. But as our friend Josh mentioned in the ACC preview, they have a new offensive coordinator. And this guy brought his quarterback from Fordham. So I just looked up what Fordham did last season. This is nuts. In their passing offense, they passed for 9.8 yards per attempt, which is basically like Grayson McCall territory. They ran for 6.3 yards per attempt. So it's a really wide open offense. They lose a good amount on the offensive line, but I'm really less concerned about that when there's a complete overhaul of the offensive scheme. Um, their defense was average. They lose, quite a bit on defense. They went 3-9. I think they're going to be completely overlooked. They had over 2.5 games of bad luck last season. The schedule is kind. They missed both South Alabama and Troy from the West, which is really nice. Um, they've got this really interesting stretch in the beginning of the season. Starting in week 2, they're against Louisiana. They host Louisiana, then they host Wake Forest, and then they host Texas A&M Commerce. So they're hosting 3 teams that really, all of them kind of stink on defense. It'll be interesting to see what this new scheme does against those defenses. The total opened at 4 wins at Circa, and now I'm seeing 3.5. What are you seeing for Old Dominion? I'm thinking probably still that since the unders at minus 135.
Three and a half plus 100.
Okay. Um, you know, I see this as a mushy middle play. There's no metrics that support it, so it's going to be like a quarter of a unit. But I think there's so many narratives against so many other teams outside of James Madison in the East that I think there's a lot of prime real estate that they can gobble up pretty quickly ahead of them. And if you're taking 3.5 here versus we see some of these other teams 6.5 or 7, and you've got some pretty Texas A&M Commerce, that's almost automatic. You only to win 3 more. Yeah, sign me up. I'll do just a hunch play over.
Yeah, I mean the crazy thing about this team last year, they went 3-9. Their 3 wins: Virginia Tech, Arkansas State, and Coastal Carolina. Three of the toughest teams on their schedule, probably, because they beat Virginia Tech, but then weirdly lost to Virginia. But they lost to Virginia by 2. Like I remember betting this team a lot in terms of spreads, and then I think we stopped doing that after a bit. I think it was after the Liberty game. We're like, okay, we're done here. But no, like this team was a weird. Like this team was really good, and they should have probably made a bowl last year. Uh, so this quarterback is from Fordham, yes, but he apparently, I think he's only had 13 career attempts, right? He's very very new. He's barely played. Now he's from their system obviously, and he was probably their backup last year. But this is new. Now that being said, though, we like when we look at this, we've seen like obviously we're talking about Cam Ward at Washington State. Unsure exactly what he's going to do this year, and he wasn't great at Washington State. Not horrible though. We're now at Old Dominion. We're not playing against the Pac-12 anymore. We're now playing against the Sun Belt, right? So
Yep.
even then, in that case, then that jump up shouldn't be that bad between D2 and the Sun Belt. So I think I have this team as stairs up. I think this team could impress this year.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just a couple points on that. Just to your point, I made a point several times about how great the defenses of the Sun Belt were in 2022. In the East, you're not going to see the same. I think that James Madison, like I said, they should be just as good. But, I'm expecting Marshall to take a big step back without the defensive coordinator. You've got Coastal Carolina, who just was a sieve last season. So it's not like you're going against, Power 5 defenses to your point at all. It's the ground's there for the taking. And they actually did beat good Coastal Carolina when they had a healthy Grayson McCall too. They destroyed it.
Yeah, Old Dominion, man, just a very weird season. I don't know how they did what they did, but somehow they did. So, yeah. So, next up, Georgia Southern. So I have this team as a lobby. They improved from last year a little bit, but it is still Clay Helton, right? And the thing is, it's like, okay, Clay Helton is 6. He went 6-6 regular season, lost the bowl game. They beat Nebraska as 23-point underdogs. I think that was Clay Helton staring at Scott Frost saying, "I'm taking you with me." Well
said.
Like you're gonna fall the same fate as me. The thing is, like, I just feel like we're like, oh man, he's made a lot of improvements here. It's like, okay, but this is still Clay Helton. This was not particularly good at USC, and I have concerns about that. Like, I think there's a ceiling here, and I think we're basically at that ceiling. I think, yes, they beat Nebraska, and I feel like they're getting way, way too much credit for beating Nebraska, and I think that was just a horrible, horrible Nebraska team, and I think they're gonna stay about the same. Maybe like about 6-6. Maybe they go 5-7, don't miss a bowl. I think that's probably the most likely case here.
I hate you for doing this to me. You're going to make me defend Clay Helton because I am actually more bullish on this team than you.
Wow.
And I'm not going to flag this because I even hate to say that. I have him as stairs up. I'll just here's some points to consider. I think last season was going to be the absolute toughest from what they're going to try to do on offense because they were transitioning out of the triple option. So I think that was going to be the most difficult season from an offensive standpoint. And they did actually have, by my metrics, the most explosive passing game in the Sun Belt. That was with Kyle Van Treese, who really stunk at Buffalo. And actually his numbers stunk at Georgia Southern too. His apex was 82. So I think, not that I watched a lot of them other than just for giggles, as you mentioned, when they beat Nebraska, that was kind of funny.
That was really funny.
But I think, they bring in Davis Brin from Tulsa, who's a lot more proven, apex of 97 or 119 in 2 years, which is way higher than Van Treese had at Buffalo against a lower level MAC. So I think that I'm kind of imagining what the metrics are telling me what this team looked like. It was like a lot of deep balls that connected on some and a lot of misses and a lot of frustration and probably a lot of interceptions. And I think Brin is going to be a lot better at a higher completion percentage and lower interception rate. So I think that offense actually is going to be one of the better ones in the Sun Belt. And again, I hate you for making me be so bullish on this team. All right. Having said that, the defense, it was the worst in the Sun Belt, fourth worst in FBS. They have below average improvement metrics, and this aligns completely with the defenses. I saw Clay Helton's USC. I feel better now. I actually had him as the worst team in the East last season. Like I said, they could have the best offense in the conference, definitely in the East, if things fall a certain way. The defense is going to hold this team back. Again, not really breaking news. If you remember Clay Helton at USC, 6.5 feels about right. This puts them in that bursting middle class and just kind of adds more fat that I can pick with that Old Dominion over 3.5 bet.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, okay. You want me to go? I guess I go again with Troy.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, so Troy is. I have Troy as stairs down. Actually, let me just find Troy here. Um, I think they lose a lot of important pieces. They keep their quarterback, but they got very lucky in a lot of these games last year. Um, they beat Marshall. They let me see here. Where were some of them? Yeah, they narrowly beat Texas State, 16-point favorites, only won by 3. South Alabama, they're an underdog. They won by 4. Uh, Army apparently almost lost to Army West Point. And they
Yeah.
still got an injured to win the Sun Belt. They got to play off against injured Grayson McCall in the championship game. This team,
Good call.
there is no way this team will be able to replicate the 12-2 they were last year. And then I think UTSA, then they beat UTSA in the bowl, right? Yeah, they somehow beat, and we didn't think they were going to. We had UTSA as favored in that
Yeah.
game. UTSA was favored in that game, and somehow they didn't. Like, there's no way this team is going to maintain a 12-2. There's no way. And what's their total here? 8.5 plus 110.
Yeah.
So the lines don't believe 12-2 either. So, but what are your thoughts on that?
Working kind of backwards for a second. We mentioned this in the American preview. That bowl win over UTSA was UTSA was without Will Stein, who had at that point left for Oregon already.
Mm-hmm.
So they used their promoted, I think, special teams coach, who's now their offensive coordinator. Good luck with that. That was not really a great debut for him. So I think that told a lot of that story too about that that win over UTSA. I see him as stairs down too. They, some things you didn't mention. They had a poor running game last season. Their offensive line has to fill 3 open spots. They lost over half of their Ryan and they added 0 through the portal, which is a little surprising because Troy actually, for Sunbelt, they actually recruit pretty well. That's a little surprising. The thing is their defense. I had them 11th best in all of FBS, and I had their pass defense as the 7th best in all of FBS. They should be just about as good. So they should be like in that top tier of defenses in the conference with James Madison. You make a good point. They were lucky. I had them with 1.9 games of good luck last season. K4 projects them to have a 1.9 game regression. So there's 2 bearish signs there. They've got a brutal stretch here in weeks 2 to 4. This is just brutal, man. At Kansas State, then they host JMU, who I think is the best team in the conference, and then they host Western Kentucky, who I think is by far the best team in Conference USA and probably a top 5 team in the group of 5. That's where I had them last season. They also pull, like I said, James Madison and also Georgia State from the East, which I think is not the best pull. They do get South Alabama at home. The 8 wins, I think, seems fair. I thought the over 165 felt a little rich. Now you're saying it's 8.5 now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I still, I don't know. When you got a 1 unit that's just going to be so good, I can't really fade them when they, they've got such an advantage over so many other teams in their division. So I'm not going to play it. I think they're stairs down. I'll keep it at that for now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, stairs down, but not complete collapse. There was talent there, but like this team will be worse, but maybe not that worse. So we'll see. All right. So now your team, the team you are wearing the jersey
Yes.
of.
There
There
we go.
you
South
go.
Alabama. As
Yes.
a reminder, I had them over 6 wins last season. In my house, we call that an October special. Your season win total that cashes in October before you even get to November. Those are nice. Um, Overall, the team has improved under Coach Kane Womack. Before he came on board, their overall power rating was a negative 9.3. He improved them to a negative 4.0 in season one, and last season a plus 5.1. Improving by 14 power rating points is just ridiculous in just 2 seasons. You know, we mentioned this just talking about Troy. They lost out basically on the conference title just with that 10 to 6 home loss to Troy, which is brutal. What I really like about this program is he retains his talent. Womack does. He has the highest returning Ryan in the Sun Belt. He returns all 5 of his starters on the offensive line. Only 8 defenses in the entire country return more starts from their defense from the 2022 defense. Um, I bring this up just for kind of this week's quick sermon. When I hear Power 5 coaches complaining off the record about I have to do so much work, to keep my roster intact and people from leaving, oh, it's so hard. This isn't in the job description. That's not what I signed up for. Well, guess what? This guy is first time head coach. He's at South Alabama. They don't have the resources of any Power 5 program. He's kept all of his talent there, all of it. Nobody left. None of them. You know, if you don't want to do that job, go to your athletic director and say, I know who can do the job. His name is Kane Womack. He's at South Alabama, and just resign. This guy can do it without the resources. End of sermon. That's it. Stairs up. Okay. Offense. Quarterback Carter Bradley, the quarterback, he's pretty good. 104 apex. He missed all the 4 good defenses from the Eastern Division last season. The defense will be really good again, right there with JMU and Troy, maybe just a little bit below them. Where I'm a little scared here is they had 1.8 games of good luck last season. K4 projects them also to regress by 2.6 games. Their road schedule is just a joke. They're at Tulane, they're at Oklahoma State, they're at James Madison, and they're at Troy. That's just, and I love this program clearly, and I love the direction they're headed, but that is just tough. I couldn't count on a single one of those being a win. Maybe a couple of coin flips, but that's just a tough road. They need to take another step forward on offense, and I just don't think Bradley is capable of doing so. His apex was 104, but like I said, he missed all the good defenses from the East, and aside from Troy, the defenses in this division sucked. I'm showing 8 for the season total wins. Do you have that too? And the overs getting played?
7.5. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just can't play it. I'm kind of worried about the quarterback here. I think that he might be the limiting factor, and I think that's the next step here.
Yeah, I have this team of stairs up as well. I think this is. I mean, I'm going to say the same things you are. They return a ton of the play, like basically everybody. I think they did lose a couple people. I think those people just graduated though. But yeah, I think this is possibly the best team in the Sun Belt. I think this is. And what is their what are their odds to win the Sun Belt? Actually, let me just check that in one
They're
second.
right there with
here.
Troy, like both around like 300 or so, between 280 and
That's
3.
kind of value. Like honestly, that's pretty good value. Where is it? I don't see one on Bet365. Huh. Oh no, it's the first one. Weirdly, South Alabama 3-1. Yeah, that's value. I'll take that. It's better than Troy at 3-1. Like, who else
It
if not
depends
like
on it depends on what you believe in at this point. Which
like?
quarterback I think it might come down to.
Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah. I mean, I'll take South Alabama. Like, I think the only team that can compete with them is James Madison, and James Madison can't win it. So,
If you don't think Troy can compete with them, absolutely you're right. Yeah.
mm-hmm. So
All right,
okay,
you want to do Louisiana?
yeah, sure. I'll do Louisiana. So I have this team as kind of lobby stairs up. I think it was. Yeah, no, sorry. I was thinking of a different team. No, they had a number of close losses last season. That should regress positively for them. They did go to a bowl. They lost to Houston in the bowl, but that was like Clayton Tune's last game, so that was pretty clear. They're probably going to lose that one. And Houston was pretty good last year. Um, Basically, defense is going to be rough for them. They almost lost their entire defense. Um, but and again, this is still rebuilding from losing Billy Napier because he was amazing with this team with this school. But now he's gone, and it wasn't a bad season, honestly. That was a pretty good rebuilding season for them. I think they can start rebuilding, and I think maybe this day should be another positive year. They're probably not going to be the best team in the Sun Belt, but they could definitely be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt for sure.
Yeah, I don't believe in him. I've got him stairs down. I need to see something out of their quarterback first. He stunk last season. He wasn't bum list bad, but he was still just lousy. And I need to see more or anything out of him. They lose 60% of their Ryan from last season. The defense was the strength of this team last season, and they are last in the conference in literally every experience and improvement metric in the conference. So I think that could be tough. I want to use this opportunity, though. Just when you say Louisiana, I think back to last season. This team is a great example of who does and who doesn't do their homework when they're talking about G5 previews. You can just tell some of these podcasts just mail it in, and I can't tell you how many before last season said, "Hey, Napier left the program in great shape. Louisiana is going to be great." And now this season preview, what are they saying? Oh, Napier took so much talent with him to Florida. My gosh, this is clearly a rebuild. And it's these same people that are saying it. You know, if you go back to our preview, it's actually under the SEC preview. We did some Sun Belt teams at the end. I literally said they lose a lot on the coaching staff and on the field. The play here is under 8.5 wins. And by golly, I was right, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, what's the lesson? I do more homework than the people that actually do this for a living. Great. That's discouraging. I don't know. Season total wins. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you that. I'll give you that number then. Where is it? Louisiana.
I'm seeing like 6.5 and 7, depending on the book.
I'm not. Is it? I see Louisiana Tech, Louisville.
It might be Louisiana Lafayette.
I think that's a different one. 1 second. Maybe. I'll find them. You keep going.
So yeah, I've got 6.5 or 7. I'm not going to play it, but I think if I was, the under would be the play here. I don't think it's hopeless.
UL Lafayette 7.5.
There you go. Do 7.5. Okay. I still wouldn't
very
play it.
Very weird name for them to have. UL Lafayette,
Well, they used to be Louisiana Lafayette, and they said no, we're Louisiana now. So
yeah,
and that's clear sowed confusion that we're still dealing with.
Yes. So 7.5 seems a bit. Now the over is plus 110. That's a bit high. I don't think that's playable.
Yeah, 8. I can't see it. Yeah.
No, 8's hard. So yeah. I will say though that you make a good point about you knowing more about this than the people whose job it is to do it. That's actually okay because then that creates value for us as bettors, right? Because if they're directing people to be like Louisiana's great, they were like, all right, that's great. We get a ton of value there, right? And I think so much is because when you look at this, because they just look back at the last couple of years and it's like, okay, they're 11 win season, 10 win season, 13 win season. Oh man, this team's amazing, right? But that was all coaching. That was all Billy Napier. And when you look at these, because there's these programs, remember, this is an insane example of it. Bowling Green under Urban Meyer, right? Okay, how's Bowling Green doing now, right? This is the thing, right? It's
Bowling Green. That's a good point, though. Yeah.
No, for some of these schools, especially some of these lower schools, it is completely determined on the coaching. Literally, if you have a better coach, you will win. You will win 9 times out of 10 those games. Those close games, even if you have a lower talented team, the better coach will win those games. And conversely, if you have a worse coach, that will actually hurt you even more in those games too, right? So, and it's the same thing as in Division 1, right? This is why I guarantee you, if you charted through, you could probably see where some schools spike in terms of season win totals, and then they immediately crash after their coach gets hired off to a Power 5 job. And
Yep.
and the question is whether or not they continue that or not. But
and
that's the thing.
and this is the classic, like, and I understand it because it's almost like just a natural reflex. Well, let's just hire the coordinator that knows the program best to stay on board, and
Mm-hmm.
that usually doesn't work out. I mean, that just goes again and again. But you kind of see the inkling to do it because you don't want to rebuild when you have kind of you think you still have that momentum. Um, it works
Mm-hmm.
out maybe a little bit, but most of the time it turns out to be like a Mark Helfrich or a Larry Coker, and not the assistant that's just so awesome like a Ryan Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So okay. Next up, Southern Mississippi.
Yeah, Southern Mississippi. They actually made a bowl last season, which is surprising because I didn't have them ranked all that well. So their third season under Will Hall. I have them as stairs down. The problem here is Will Hall is a former offensive coordinator. He actually was the offensive coordinator at Tulane under Willie Fritz. Here's a little history of Southern Miss. So their offense in 2020 was a plus 0.7. Then Will Hall was hired, and their offense became a negative 15.0, and then a negative 7.1. So if you remember the COVID season, that was when Southern Miss actually had three head coaches, which I think is a record. I don't know if you remember that. One guy was fired after the first week when most teams hadn't even played a game yet. Then the next guy quit after 3 weeks to take a FCS job. And so they had three coaches. And that team had a much better offense than what this team has seen with an offensive coordinator as its head coach. The quarterback play here has just stunk under him. Now they're starting over again at quarterback from a quarterback from Houston who hasn't thrown a pass in a game. Even with Frank Gore Jr. at running back, the ground game is well below average. The only improvement here has been on defense. This is interesting. I don't know if you know this. I just learned this as I was prepping for this podcast. Um, Before Austin Armstrong was hired, the defense was a negative 4.5. He was hired. They improved a little bit to a negative 4.1 and then significantly to a plus 2.4, despite having improvement metrics and returning talent metrics, which were projecting a step back. This guy is now the defensive coordinator at Florida. I didn't know that. So
Hmm.
this might be your Gators' path to a bowl game.
Maybe.
Congratulations on that belatedly. So
Yes.
the person that replaces him is a first-time defensive coordinator again, which I don't really liked. What's interesting is even though they made a bowl game, if you look back on not on the results, but look on the spreads of their game, some of these games, the market pegged them as a really bad team. They were favored by only 4.5 over a really bad Arkansas State team. They were favored by only 2.5 at Texas State, who was really bad and fired their coach. They were actually somehow a 3-point dog to ULM, who was just awful, maybe one of the absolute worst teams in all of FBS. So, I mean, credit for them for outperforming the market in that regard. But my gosh, if you've got the market just saying you stink, you stink, you stink, I've got more faith in the market in this case, seen as the improvements, away from the head coach's side of the ball. This you might enjoy this. The season win total here I'm showing is 5. It's minus 110 on both sides. I ran the numbers on this and I came to an ROI of only plus 2%. So I'm not playing it, but I'm thinking maybe I should call up that dope who bet Purdue money line in the first round of the NCAA tournament because this sounds like it's just up his alley. 2% margin.
Hmm. Yeah. That's a good point actually. Yeah. I will say that I do have this team as lobby. I think like the thing is again, they've had no quarterback. A quarterback would be helpful to this team that would actually open up the pass. Like that's the level we're at, right? Like if you add
Yeah.
a quarterback, it can't be like that bad, right? Like it's not like I don't think you could like could you add a quarterback and then get worse? I guess like if Frank Gore regresses or something. Um but no, it's pretty crazy. I do have this as lobby. They do have a tough schedule though. They have Florida State and Tulane. That's fun, and then
Yeah.
also Texas State. And then just a smattering of Sun Belt teams: South Alabama, App State. Um, it's just it, and then Old Dominion. They probably make a bowl. Like they probably make a bowl. That's it. Like that's
Oh,
like maybe
yeah.
60% chance to make a bowl, but like that's not particularly great. Maybe.
Don't overlook they're at Mississippi State. They're like on the
Oh, I
wrong end of
forgot that.
that
Yeah.
the Southeastern Conference breather weekend.
Yes. I think Old Dominion is randomly playing LSU in that second last weekend.
Yep,
So
they
they've at
are
least stopped playing FCS teams. Now they're playing Sun Belt teams. They're closer, I
somewhat. Yeah,
guess. Yeah, but no, it's not particularly great. I think I think this team, like, maybe they make a bowl, like probably 50-50 make a bowl. I think that win total is right. I'm not touching that. That win total screams like just stay away from that.
yeah.
Um okay. Louisiana
Now we're getting to the real
Monroe.
good stuff here.
Yeah, ULM. Um Lobby. I have them as Lobby. They lose a ton of pieces. But they have a relatively good coach. But it's going to be a rough year. I think they did some stuff last year. They were 4-8, so they were actually somewhat close to a bowl. Um, I mean, they open up a Texas again for some reason. I don't know why they're deciding to play Texas. Or no, sorry, they don't play. They don't open up a Texas. Sorry, Texas plays someone else. They opened up a Texas last year. They have Texas A&M. That's definitely a beatable, a winnable game. But
Not for them.
I don't know. Yeah, good for them. No, I mean, I think they can improve a little bit here, but it's just like, I mean, this team has shown improvement in the last couple of years, but this is still not an amazing team. Maybe they compete for a bowl. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, going to the schedule first of all. They're again another one of these on the SEC breather weekend. They're at Mississippi the second to last week of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of the Sun Belt teams. I'm just not going to get into it too much. Just they had decent quarterback play last season. Of course, that guy split to North Texas. Terry Bowden was okay at one point. Just this era, it just feels like an elderly dog that needs to be taken to the vet and put down. They need to start over. This isn't going anywhere. They probably don't have the resources. I don't see it happening. Pretty telling that the season win total is 3.5 and the under's getting crushed. It's probably at 3 now. So you're seeing books. Looks like you're seeing books that are more aggressive to move the total. Are you seeing 3?
I'm seeing 3.5, but it's plus
That's going to be
145
on the over, right?
on the over. Yeah.
Yeah. So under's like what, minus 170 or something?
165.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine I'm going to watch this team or even have a reason to watch them. Good luck if they do, but
That is true. I mean, I will say you have open up with Army, West Point, and Lamar, so that's winnable games. Texas A&M, yeah, you probably are going to lose that. Probably that would be really funny if they lost. But I don't think that's not going to happen though. Um, yeah, you have Georgia Southern, Arkansas State, Southern Miss, Louisiana, but like you got to find three. You got to find two more wins of
yeah,
those. It's hard.
nah. I just even Army. So they're hosting Army, but I would make Army at least like an 11-point favorite in that one.
Mm-hmm. So
At
it's
least.
yeah. Well, the thing is, it's yeah. I mean, the other thing is too, with a lot of these ones like plus 145. Well, the game they're going to win, they're probably going to be like what plus 200 to win that game. So like, what's the like? There's no point in betting a plus 145.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Good point.
Okay.
All right. Almost done here. Another just awesome team. Arkansas State 3-9 last season. I have them. I have them stuck in a miserable lobby, is what I'll say. Just to characterize it correctly. Third season under Butch Jones. Butch Jones is a former offensive coordinator. Again, this is exactly what you don't want to see. Both the season before he was hired, their offense was a plus 4.4. He gets hired, and the last two seasons, their offense was a -6 and a -5.1. Well below the Sun Belt average, even though James Blackman was a pretty good quarterback last season. Now they go to JT Shrout, who had an apex of 47 at Colorado. Hey, this is great and almost claim to fame here. only Boston College had a worse GGAB than them. So it was almost ground game above Arkansas State, maybe this year. There's no reason to expect any improvement on offense. I think they could probably get a lot worse. On defense, they were the second worst defense in the Sun Belt West. The defense just hasn't improved at all since he was hired as well. There's been no movement in the 2 seasons, and I just don't see any reason for a third. Anything that happened a third. The only thing is, I showed 1.3 games of bad luck last season. K Ford is projecting 1.9 more wins. This is where I just kind of don't believe my numbers. I need to see it. I think we need to just basically make the point here. Butch Jones as a head coach. There's 2 parts. There is Butch Jones in the 2 jobs where he followed Brian Kelly at Central Michigan and at Cincinnati. 50 wins, 27 losses. Awesome. Well done. Butch Jones at the 2 jobs where he did not follow Brian Kelly. 39 wins and 46 losses. I think we know where this one is going. If we actually did a preseason bottom 10, I would have this as a strong candidate for maybe a number 1 team. They'd be right there. Somehow they opened at 5 wins at Circa. Now I'm seeing it at 4.5. Under is about even. Looks like I'm probably going to play that. I just can't see a path here for him.
I've got under 4.5 at plus 100. It's not horrible.
Yeah, that's. I can't. Trust me, folks. There's no better joy aside from the fact that they're not going to be on TV. But this is such a team that is such a pleasure to take the under on. It's so fun when the team is this bad and the quarterback is this bad and the coach is this bad. Just do it.
Week 1 at Oklahoma, fun. Week 2 hosting Memphis, also fun. Those are not particularly great. Now they do play UMass, so that's something. And they have ULM on there, but again with 4.5 guys. Okay, they're in Stony Brook. Okay, so I'm seeing 3 wins. Southern Miss. Okay, maybe give them a 4th, but you've got Troy. They also, they could lose UMass. They have Texas State. They have Marshall, South Alabama, Louisiana. It's hard to find a 5th one there. So yeah, I think I have this as a lobby team. But yeah,
just because you can't get worse than what they're so bad to begin with.
Exactly, right? 3-9, elevator down. Elevate minus 2 wins somehow. No, they. The thing is, it's the 3rd year for their head coach. No bowl so far. That's not particularly great. And again, the college football is littered with people who were like, "Oh, I was offensive coordinator for this one good head coach, and then now I'm going to be in this job at a G5 school for 3 or 4 years until eventually they just say, oh, screw this," right? So there are so many of those. And
we have one in the East named Clay Helton, by the way.
Yeah, Clay Helton. I feel like you have to because and this is basically the entirety of the NFL, right? There's so many times when you have a really good head coach and they're like, okay, let's just hire all of his coordinators away. And sometimes it works. Yep. In the NFL, sometimes it actually does work out because to get to be an offensive coordinator in the NFL, you basically need to show something. You can't just be like, well, I just got dragged along with this. Generally, you had to have done something to be an offensive coordinator. So it generally it somewhat works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out though. But I think even in college football though, for some of these guys, it's again, this is the thing, right? Have they with Lincoln Riley has he had an offensive coordinator hired away? No.
He doesn't have one.
This is
That's
the thing. This is the thing. I don't even know who their offensive coordinator officially
is. They don't
have.
He's the guy. That's kind of a tough.
He's officially.
That's a tough.
Okay, then are they going to hire their quarterbacks coach? This is the thing. It's at what point do you say, okay, it's this guy. We're not going to touch anything on his offense, right? And I think that's what you need to. Yeah. That's where you need to do this, right?
You know what it's like? You'll appreciate this as a political guy. It's kind of like the ad where the person says, I was in the room when, not that I did this, just I was in the room when they made this decision. Great. You know what? So was the wallpaper. You're the wallpaper assistant. That's what we'll call those people.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot to be said for especially with politicians, right? And it's they got cut both ways. So oh, this person was in office at the same time that this other person. It's oh the in Michigan or something. It'll be oh the Gresham Whitmer / Biden plans. They're not even remotely related. You can't combine these two things together. But On the flip side, though, like you have things where like, oh, I work like I like some guy from like Texas will be like, I supported Trump doing this. Like you were a random congressman, you had literally no input in this. Like you can't even you can't even do this stuff. Like it's sad, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing in college football, I guess, because it's like the head coach comes up with a game plan, you just kind of vaguely execute it. You call the plays he says to call, and then you're like, now you get to be head coach. And
Yeah.
so yeah, okay.
All right.
Uh, last
Last
but
one.
not least, yes.
No, not least by any standpoint. This might surprise you. Texas State 4-8 last season, which is a little better than their record is based on their power rating. I have them as stairs up. First season under G.J. Kinney. Who is G.J. Kinney? He was the head coach for one season at Incarnate Word. What is Incarnate Word? One of those crazy Texas colleges that does crazy stuff on offense. 2022, Incarnate Word. 10.2 yards per pass attempt. You can hear the Chihuahuas loving this. She's going nuts for these stats. 5.8 yards per rush attempt. The new defensive coordinator, also from Incarnate Word. I like that because when you have these crazy offenses, and you saw kind of the problem for this at USC last season, you need a certain level, a certain kind of defense. And actually, Chip Kelly's team did this well. They weren't the most awesome defenses he had at Oregon, but they were very complementary to that crazy offense that they played. And they knew how to do just enough to win the games and just frustrate the other teams. And I think that's what you got here when you're taking both the offensive and defensive coordinator from a school. There's a huge roster overhaul. This is actually the biggest overhaul that I've seen since I've been tracking the experience improvement metrics. I like some of the transfers they have in. This is actually really cool. They have 3 starting offensive linemen from Incarnate Word. They actually started 83 times at Incarnate Word, so they're very experienced in this system. They have 1 receiver that also started at Incarnate Word. Their new quarterback is Malik Hornsby. He transferred from Arkansas. He was actually a top 10 quarterback when he was coming out of high school. 2 defensive players also transferred from Incarnate Word. So again, they know kind of what needs to happen. This is really interesting. I'm not first on this because Circa opened them at 3.5 wins. They're at 4.5 and the over's at 140, what I'm seeing right now. I actually like them still over, and this is kind of the ODU narrative on steroids. There are so many teams in this division that just don't have it. You've got the directionless, which are Louisiana and Southern Miss, the listless, Arkansas State, the hopeless, ULM. I think that if you've got a strong identity, which clearly they do, I think that can go a long way when there's not a huge talent gap. What's interesting is the preseason media poll already has them passing Arkansas State and ULM. And I think the next 2, Louisiana and Southern Miss, it's not that, these teams are far from perfect, and I think they can be easily passed. I'm still going to play the over 4.5, especially since I'm seeing like plus money on that. I like it. Fun team to bet on. And if it blows up, okay, it's just a little bit of a partial unit. This is interesting too. Their schedule. They play week 3. They host Jackson State. I'm kind of curious what that's going to turn out to be with what Coach Prime left at Jackson State.
Yeah. So I also have this team as stairs up. So fun fact about this, you talk about the quarterback from Incarnate Word, and you've seen this data point as well. When we were building our top 25 for FBS, Incarnate Word kind of broke the model because they were just so good. Like, it was literally like they just destroyed everybody. And, like, the model's like they're a top, like, 15 team. Like, okay, maybe not. Like, the model thinks they should be because they just destroyed everybody. And, like, okay, they probably are not actually a top 15 FBS team. And they also didn't win the Division II playoffs. But, like, they broke them. Like, they literally broke the model. And now they're like, oh, cool, we're now just going to take that entire team, and now we're just going to invade Texas State, and now we're just going to take over that program, and now we're just going to be in the Sun Belt. Like, yes, please, take this. Like, first of all, 4.5, there's, like, okay, there's Baylor, okay, whatever. UTSA, that's potentially a winnable game, maybe. Jackson State again, Nevada, one of the worst teams in the Mountain West. Southern Miss, Louisiana. You have ULM, Georgia Southern, Coastal Carolina, which could be bad. You have Arkansas State as well. Like, I think the toughest team they're going to play is South Alabama, which is probably the best team in the Sun Belt. But, like, this team could be, like, they probably lose to Baylor, but, like, this team could actually be pretty half decent. So Yeah, give me Texas State. Give me over 4.5. I absolutely love that. I have this as stairs up as well.
Nice. Okay, then final questions. What is the likelihood that the Sun Belt gets the Access Bowl bid?
Huh. I think I'll give it. I think the same answer for the other ones. I think like 25%. I think
Wow.
if South Alabama were to go undefeated, I think then maybe they'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll give it to them, right? If South Alabama went undefeated or like 11-1, they have a strong case for it versus some other teams. So I think potential. I'd say like 25% chance, probably the same as the other ones.
I'm literally going 1%. I think the problem is that the by far the best team in this conference is not eligible, and I think that just is the kibosh.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts that South Alabama and Troy have to play each other, and I think they've got very losable games. So I think that kind of does them in this season. Man, if James Madison was eligible, I'd probably have like maybe 30 or 35%, but I just
Wow.
can't.
Fair.
Okay, which coach from this conference gets hired away for a Power Five job first? I will go first, and I will say John Summerall from Troy. One season, just the turnaround there was amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I this is gonna sound crazy, and you're gonna hate me when I say this, but I kind of think Clay Helton for Georgia Southern, and for the simple reason that you know exactly what I'm gonna say, right? Because this happens all the time, right? Oh, we've got this guy goes from a Power Five down to a G5. And he's like, oh, he was the head coach at USC, didn't figure it out. He figured things out at Georgia Southern. Now he got them like it's that stupid thing, right? So I could
Yep.
see that potentially. Now I would hire the guy from James Madison for sure, like 100%. I'd hire him
Yeah.
over
Yep.
Clay Helton. But I feel like you can't ignore the desire of some G5 school to be like, well, he was the head coach at USC, right? And that's the thing. But no,
Yeah.
your answer is better than mine, but mine is a horrible answer. But yes,
Yours is sadly accurate, though, I think. So, all right. Pick one upset in this conference.
huh? Let's go Texas State. What does Texas State play? Uh, let's see here. Texas State over Coastal. Sure, it's probably a dog.
I like that. Okay. I've got Marshall losing at Georgia State. I think Georgia State's got a good quarterback, and Marshall's going down the elevator shaft. And it's just the week after Marshall is at NC State. I think this is going to be one of those classic getting punched in the face right as you exhale situations, and especially it's on the road. Back-to-back road games too. There's just a lot to not like here. So that's why I'm going with that. Okay, who plays for the conference title?
Hmm. Uh. I'd say. Give me App State versus South Alabama.
Wow, we are way off here. Okay. I'm going with Troy, and I'm going with Georgia State. I just,
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of like just the horse racing methodology where I just take take this guy out, take this guy out, take this guy out, and I go fourth down the favorite list. It's like, okay, I'll settle on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not much confidence, but interesting. I like when we have four different teams. That's really cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. So that we've done it. We have previewed all of
The season is
all
over.
of that is it for preview season. And now we get into the lines. The first lines of the season. There are counted 7 week 0 games this week, ranging from 2:30 Eastern time with Navy and Notre Dame playing in Dublin. Finally, they let Notre Dame play in their home country.